What happens when the world's most tightly managed royal meets America's most unpredictable provocateur, live on daytime TV? Audiences tuned in expecting a civil chat about mental health, charity work, and royal diplomacy. What they got instead was a slow-motion meltdown, a public collision between two titans from entirely different worlds. Howard Stern had been explicitly told to play it safe. Prince William had been briefed to remain composed. But when two storms are set on a collision course under the unforgiving lights of live television, someone always gets burned. The set of The View looked like any other day. Coffee mugs lined up in perfect symmetry, studio lights humming softly overhead, producers nervously checking their clipboards as countdowns echoed through the studio. But beneath the surface, tension simmered. Today's guest lineup was anything but ordinary. Howard Stern, the week surprise guest co-host, lounged in his chair like a lion in a dog park. His infamous sunglasses were still on, despite the indoor setting. His curly hair was unruly. His smirk, loaded. Producers had brought him in to jolt sagging ratings, but nobody expected an earthquake. Sitting beside Whoopi Goldberg and Joy Behar, Howard looked hilariously out of place, a shock of chaos against daytime television's carefully maintained calm. Before cameras rolled, Joy leaned toward him and whispered, "Just don't start anything." Howard gave a mock-innocent grin. "Me? I'm all about peace and love." Everyone knew better. Then came Prince William. Dressed immaculately in a dark charcoal suit, open-collared light blue shirt, and polished shoes, he walked in with the silent confidence of someone raised under constant surveillance. The crowd erupted into applause as he flashed the signature Windsor smile, half-practiced, half-genuine. He greeted the hosts with a nod and sat directly across from Howard Stern. Whoopi opened the show with grace. Today on The View, we're honored to be joined by Prince William to discuss his mental health initiatives, youth leadership programs, and his powerful new documentary on supporting veterans after service. Howard exaggerated a bow. "And here I thought we were digging into royal scandals. Guess I skimmed the wrong memo." The audience chuckled. William's smile faltered just slightly. He didn't flinch, but there was a flicker in his eyes. "Nice to meet you too, Howard," he said coolly. Whoopi quickly redirected the conversation toward William's charity work. Here, the prince found his footing. He spoke with polished enthusiasm. Phrases like mental wellness, community impact, and post-service reintegration rolled smoothly off his tongue. He looked comfortable, in control. But Howard Stern wasn't about control. Midway through a sentence, Howard leaned forward, voice soft but loaded. "So let me ask you something," he said. "You talk a lot about helping others find their voices. But have you found yours? Or are you just repeating the one people want to hear?" Silence. William blinked, lips parted, as if unsure whether to laugh or defend himself. Whoopi cleared her throat. Joy glanced up sharply from her cue cards. Even the camera operators hesitated. William composed himself. "I believe storytelling builds empathy," he said, measured. "When done right, it brings people together." Howard nodded slowly. Sure. But when does storytelling turn into branding? When do noble causes start sounding like carefully curated press releases?" William's posture straightened. "That's an interesting perspective." Howard didn't let up. "Look, I respect what you're doing. But most people dealing with trauma don't launch podcasts, Netflix documentaries, and media tours. They heal quietly, privately." There was laughter from the audience, nervous, uncertain. Joy tried to pivot. "William, tell us more about your latest work with veterans in transitional care." William nodded quickly, grateful for the lifeline. "Yes. We're creating comprehensive networks, mental health resources, employment pathways, and family support structures for veterans adjusting to civilian life." As he spoke, Howard leaned back in his chair, arms folded, eyes narrowed. When William paused, Howard pounced again. "Do you ever miss it?" William looked confused. "Miss what?" Howard smiled faintly. "The palaces. The pageantry. Being the future king." A tight smile spread across William's face. "That was never the part that defined me." Howard cocked his head. "Wasn't it, though? The crown, the titles, the spotlight. That's who you were bred to be. Walking away from that is one thing. But staying in the public eye while claiming privacy, that's a bit of a contradiction, don't you think? William's smile dropped. I've never claimed perfection, Howard. I've only claimed the right to make my own choices. Howard raised both hands. Of course. Totally fair. But let me ask what a lot of people are thinking. If you wanted out of the royal bubble so badly, why are you still doing interviews, documentaries, launching platforms? The tension was now palpable. William's jaw tightened. His hands rested tensely on his lap, fingers tapping a soft rhythm, one that betrayed the stress beneath his composed surface. Joy stepped in, voice sharp but calm. Let's take a breath. This is an open conversation, but let's keep it respectful. Howard backed off slightly. Hey, I'm just asking the questions no one else will. That's what I'm here for. William turned to Joy, then back to Howard. Howard, I didn't come here to defend my life choices to someone who's built a career tearing people down. I came to talk about people who need real help, veterans, young men struggling with mental health, families trying to stay whole. The audience clapped, louder this time. The crowd had chosen a side. Howard gave a shrug, not apologizing but easing his tone. Fair enough, mate. I just hope all this noise leads to real change, not just good headlines. The rest of the segment moved on, but the energy had shifted. William remained polite, but distant. Howard cracked fewer jokes. The co-hosts tiptoed through questions. The studio had witnessed something raw, uncomfortable, and real. And when the credits rolled, the audience knew they hadn't just seen a celebrity interview. They'd seen a showdown. Respect goes both ways, Prince William finally said, his tone sharp, his gaze unwavering. I've spent years trying to shift the focus to causes that matter. If people can't separate that from the tabloid noise, maybe that says more about them than it does about me. Howard Stern smiled, that polite, razor-edged grin that always cut deeper than it seemed. Sounds rehearsed. A beat of silence dropped over the studio like a curtain. Even the daytime audience, prepped for cheerful chatter, wasn't sure whether to laugh or cringe. Joy Behar clapped her hands lightly, as if to break the spell. All right. We're going to keep this conversation going. When we come back from the break, we'll dive into Prince William's upcoming charity gala. Howard quipped, can't wait to hear how much the tickets cost. A few chuckles. William didn't join in. His jaw tightened. The mask of the polished prince was slipping. As the show cut to commercial, the camera zoomed out, catching a telling image, Howard's sly grin, and Prince William's icy stare locked directly on him. Whatever had just started, it wasn't over. The view returned from commercial break with forced smiles and uncomfortable cheer. Whoopi Goldberg's voice tried to pull things back to center. We're here with Prince William, talking about his recent charitable work and his mission to support veterans and global mental health advocacy. The camera panned across the hosts, then landed on William. He sat a little straighter now, his smile more controlled, his fingers tapping rhythmically on his thigh, the only sign he allowed of the irritation brewing inside him. Howard, by contrast, looked almost too relaxed. His arms draped across the back of the couch like he owned the place. Joy tried to steer the conversation toward the gala. William, your foundation's upcoming event in New York is already making headlines. But Howard leaned in again. So let me get this straight, he began, voice smooth but barbed. You stepped back from royal duties to avoid media attention. Yet here you are on the most watched morning show in America. William nodded, slowly. I left an institution. I didn't leave my voice. Howard raised his eyebrows. But you didn't exactly leave the cameras either. Nervous laughter fluttered through the audience. William leaned in, measured but firm. There's a difference between controlling your narrative and being controlled by one. Howard tilted his head, amused. But don't you think constantly reminding people how tough it was growing up royal is kind of exhausting? Joy attempted to cut in. Let's not. No, William said calmly, his voice clipped but clear. It's a fair question. When you grow up under a microscope, you learn that silence protects the ones who hurt you. Speaking up isn't complaining. It's reclaiming your truth. Howard grinned, sharp as ever. Sounds like something a therapist wrote. This time, there was no laughter. Just silence. Thick. Awkward. Whoopi, always the lifeline, jumped in. Let's shift gears. William, your children, how are they adjusting to life in the States? William's expression softened. A crack in the armor. They're thriving. They love the outdoors, the space. They're growing up free. Howard didn't blink. Free from what? Responsibility. Discipline. Royal protocol. William turned toward him fully, and the warmth drained from his face. Free from being born into a public identity they didn't choose. Free from being photographed through fences and chased by headlines before they could even speak. Howard smirked. Right. Except for the Netflix crew filming in your living room. That did it. William didn't raise his voice. He didn't lash out. But his entire posture shifted. I'm not here to debate my children's privacy with someone who made a career off intruding on others, he said coldly. If you think bluntness makes you brave, you've confused cruelty with honesty. Even Howard looked like he might back down. For a moment. Then he leaned in again, voice lower, sharper. Tell me something, William. Without the crown, without the title, are you even interesting? Joy gasped audibly. The studio went silent. Tense. Frozen. Howard pressed on, quieter now. Who are you when you're not the heir to the throne? Who are you without the scandal, without the press, without your name stitched onto the back of a legacy you didn't build? William stared back at him. No words. Just a stare so piercing it erased the smirk from Howard's face, if only for a moment. Whoopi jumped in like a lifeguard breaking up a fight. We're going to take another break. When we return, we'll be discussing Prince William's humanitarian work in Africa and the global reach of his mental health platform. But as the cameras faded and upbeat music played, nothing could smooth over the storm brewing on set. William sat perfectly still, his eyes never leaving Howard. Howard, looking slightly less smug now, glanced at him and offered the faintest shrug. Joy reached for her mug like it was a lifeline. Producers scrambled in the control room, whispering frantic cues. Howard had crossed a line, and Prince William wasn't done. The View came back for its final segment. But the mood had shifted entirely. The lightness was gone. The smiles were tighter. The table felt more like a chessboard now, every word, every glance a possible strike. Whoopi, always the anchor, tried to bring things back to message. We're here with Prince William, discussing global mental health and youth outreach. William, I know Africa holds a special place in your heart. But Howard, again, cut in. Hold that thought, Whoopi. One more question. Whoopi froze. So did the studio. Howard turned, eyes narrowing with that signature stern edge. William, what's it like being the second most famous person in your marriage? Gasps rippled through the audience. Off camera, a producer was heard audibly swearing. William blinked. For a beat, he looked stunned. But he recovered fast. He smiled. Cold. Composed. Fame fades. Howard. Character doesn't. This time, the silence belonged to Howard. And for the first time that morning, he had no comeback. Howard didn't stop. I mean, let's be honest here, he said, leaning in. People didn't buy your book because you wrote it. They bought it because of her. Catherine is the headline. Catherine is the brand. Catherine is the grace, the controversy, the mystique. You're just the plus one now. Joy Behar's hand flew to her mouth. The studio air turned icy. Prince William's face darkened like a storm front rolling in. His jaw tensed. And when he finally spoke, his voice was cold steel. She's my wife. Not a headline. Howard raised an eyebrow, unfazed. No, she's both. And she knows it. That's what makes her smart. But let's not pretend that the public's interest in you wasn't re-engineered around her public appeal. Tell me, was stepping out of your brother's shadow worth stepping into hers? William sat forward now, no longer hiding behind royal polish. His calm was cracking, but his spine stayed straight. I stepped out of a system that hollowed people out and buried emotions behind tradition, he said. I chose honesty over silence. I chose family over performance. And if that unsettles you, Howard, Maybe it's because you've never risked anything for someone else in your life. Howard leaned in, unblinking. You chose publicity over privacy. You chose production deals over peace. Let's not pretend you're Gandhi with a streaming contract. Whoopi Goldberg's voice cut through like a blade, firmer now. All right, enough. Let's dial this back. We're talking about real people, real families. But William shook his head. His eyes never left Howard. No. Let him keep going. This is clearly why I was invited here. Howard shrugged. You were invited because people still care. That's the only currency you have left. But at some point, people stop listening if all you do is remind them how hard royalty was while sitting in a California mansion. William's knuckles were turning white now as he gripped the edge of the table. I didn't choose that life, he snapped. I was born into it. Howard's tone cooled, but the blade got sharper. And then you chose to sell it. Spotify. Netflix. You're not rebelling, you're rebranding. You're not stepping away, you're cashing in. Joy tried to pivot. Okay, we're going to move into... No, Howard said firmly, interrupting, eyes locked on William. He says he wants to be real. So let's be real. William's voice now cracked like thunder. You have no idea what it's like to wake up every day with a target on your back. To have your wife dehumanized in the press, your children photographed through windows by strangers. And you sit in a booth behind a microphone, throwing stones at people's lives like it's sport. Howard's voice dropped to a near whisper. And yet, here you are. Still talking. Still doing interviews. Still performing. Because the second the cameras stop rolling, you're no longer the victim. You're just a man with a famous last name, and no real job. Silence. Scalding, electric silence. Even Whoopi and Joy had nothing left to say. Then William stood. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. It was quiet, deliberate. His voice, when it came, was low but carried weight. You know nothing about my life, he said, looking Howard dead in the eyes. And I've wasted enough of it trying to explain myself to people like you. Howard looked up, still seated, still calm. Then maybe, stop trying. William's stare didn't waver. Maybe I will. He turned to Whoopi and Joy, his tone softer but resolute. Thank you both. But I won't sit here and let my family be reduced to a punchline. Joy opened her mouth to say something, anything, but William was already walking away from the table. The camera followed him as he stepped off the set. The audience didn't clap. They didn't cheer. They just watched. Howard leaned back in his chair slowly. Not smug. Not victorious. Just steady. Whoopi finally broke the silence with the only words she could find. We'll be right back. Fade to black. The view returned from commercial. But something fundamental had shifted. The usual warm, chatty atmosphere was gone. The table, once crowded with voices, now showed only 3 people. Whoopi Goldberg, Joy Behar, and Howard Stern, sitting alone in the chair William had left behind. The audience was still dazed, stunned by what had just unfolded. Whoopi tried to stitch the show back together, her voice stretched tight with composure. Well, folks, as you just saw, Prince William left us a little early today. We want to thank him for joining us. Howard cut in gently. No, Whoopi. Don't sugarcoat it. Don't pretend everything's fine. She turned to him, surprised. Joy leaned back in her chair, watching carefully. Howard cleared his throat. He looked straight into the camera. Let's be real, he said. This wasn't a PR fluff piece. It wasn't smiles and mugs and applause. This was a real conversation. And maybe that's exactly what's been missing. The audience stirred. Some leaned in. Others looked unsure if they were about to hear an apology or another blow. I get it, Howard continued. Prince William has lived a life most of us can't imagine. Born into royalty. Raised under global scrutiny. Losing his mother in a tragedy that scarred the world. That leaves a mark. It creates a shadow no child should grow up in. He looked down for a moment. Then back up. But I wasn't attacking that kid. I was challenging the man who has made a fortune telling that kid's story. Stillness filled the room. No one moved. No one breathed. I've interviewed everyone. Presidents, pop stars, billionaires. They all want the same thing: control over their narrative. And William is no different. But when you step into the public arena and monetize your trauma, you open the door to tough questions. Whoopi's voice was softer now. Do you think you pushed too far? Howard turned to her. And for the first time, there was no smirk. Of course I did. That's my job. If I don't ask the question, who will? For once, someone didn't treat him like porcelain. Joy leaned forward. But do you regret it? Howard paused. The air waited. I regret that he walked off, he said. Not because I care about the headlines, but because we were finally getting somewhere. For once, we weren't tiptoeing around the truth. He turned to the camera, his voice lower. Prince William isn't a villain. But he's not a saint either. He's a man caught between the world that made him and the one he's trying to build for himself. He's a man caught between the image he was born into and the truths he was never allowed to say. And maybe that's the real tragedy, the prince who can't escape the stage, even when he wants to disappear. The audience clapped slowly at first, then louder, until the room echoed with a strange mix of shock and respect. Whoopi raised an eyebrow. Joy gave a reluctant nod, an unspoken agreement to a truth she couldn't argue. Howard looked surprised. Not proud. Just still. Then, off camera, a stagehand whispered something into Whoopi's ear. She paused, looked up. We're getting word. Prince William has left the building. No further comment. The camera pulled back. Howard stood, straightened his jacket, lifted his mug. Thanks for letting me stir the pot. Joy smirked. You didn't stir it, Howard. You flipped the whole damn pot over. Laughter. Nervous. Real. As the outro music played and the screen faded to black, a final message appeared. In a world full of scripted interviews, maybe it's time we stop rehearsing and start telling the truth, even when it hurts. What do you think? Was this a rare glimpse of truth or a royal meltdown? Did Howard go too far, or was he the only one bold enough to say what others won't? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Subscribe for more jaw-dropping showdowns, unfiltered moments, and truth bombs that shake the spotlight. Hit that notification bell so you never miss what really goes down when the cameras are rolling.